This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future Critical Thought topics. Welcome to today's Critical Thought. Happy New Year's Day. This is going to be our first Critical Thought of 2017. Hope you noticed the new Critical Thought intro tag. Like I always say, if you're interested in pitching new topics to cover here, be them anything relating to game design or the industry in general, be sure to leave a comment. For today's Critical Thought, we're going to be talking about the subject of modern retro gaming. I think that makes sense. We'll see. This was from a topic we were talking about on the 2016 recap video, and was brought up about how we're definitely seeing a trend, or we have been seeing a trend, of retro games being designed in the modern era. Be them games like La Mulana, Shovel Knight, Owl Boy, our example for today, Memoria. Memoria. There we go. Look at that. We have a full screen example for today. See, we're getting fancier in 2017. And of course, titles like Super Meat Boy, and so many more examples. But this is one of the things that's kind of interesting about why we're still seeing games like this. We've talked about this before, that when it comes to technology, specifically with hardware-based mediums, usually when there's an advancement or an evolution in technology, the old stuff gets thrown out. You know, you have your video cards from 1998, you're not really going to be using them anymore. But on the flip side of that, another part we've talked about is that video games are very much a combination of products and art. And while there is that general consensus that older games, older technology, we don't really play them anymore, there's still that desire sometimes to go back. And it's also a very popular element for game developers, especially with the 2D genre. On an earlier Critical Thought, we talked about sort of that difference between 2D and 3D design. And when it comes to 2D games are easier to build a game around. You're not dealing with 3 dimensions, the camera's easier, and it's a lot easier to develop a game or create the level design when you're working on a screen-by-screen basis, as opposed to a massive 3D world around the player. But this topic of modern retro gaming goes a step further. We're not just seeing developers simply make, Mario again or Donkey Kong, but elevating things with either new designs or iterating on previous ones and taking things further than we would have ever have seen back in the day. A good example of that would be something like Odallus, The Dark Call. I spoke to developers, I think 2 years ago at this point. Whew. Every time I say that, it feels like it's only yesterday. But Odallus featured, again, like classic Castlevania, 2D side-scrolling action, but it elevated things by having the info panels, or the UI, on the sides instead of horizontal across the top. There's, of course, Shovel Knight, which, while it borrowed heavily from classic 2D games, specifically stuff like DuckTales, Mega Man, and Castlevania, it elevated things with new design options, new abilities, and, of course, the DLC they've added with Plague Knight, and I think they're going to do Spectre Knight, or they may be doing another one of those. And we, of course, saw about even older examples like Super Meat Boy, and again, so many more to look at. But when it comes to modern retro games, this is definitely more of an interesting take, especially again with how things have evolved. We've talked about how when it comes to indie development, you're not going to be working with, the latest and greatest engines, you're not going to have unlimited budgets. And being able to design games with this older style definitely saves a few bucks here and there. With that said, of course, it's important to mention the fact that there is a very big difference between high-quality pixel art and low-quality pixel art. When you see something like Shovel Knight, Hyper Light Drifter, there's another one I completely forgot about that a few minutes ago, and of course, Of course, after I said Hyper Light Drifter, I forgot the other example I was going to bring up. But you get the idea. When it comes to high quality pixel art, there is definitely craftsmanship at work there. And this is just one of the many ways, especially indie developers, can create a game that's greater than the sum of its parts. Goes back to another topic when we brought up about aesthetics versus graphics. And aesthetics is how a game looks unique, it looks visually striking, and it looks a lot different than games that just feature very detailed but very similar realistic looking graphics. And when it comes to retro gaming or retro games today, that kind of very visually stunning or visually unique aesthetic really helps lend itself to this greater than the sum of its parts feel that we see with these games. Again, a game like Shovel Knight, you're not going to mistake this for a game released in 2016 in terms of, Unreal Engine 4 graphics. But this is a game that you can show someone a screenshot of it, and if they've heard of this game before, they'll know it's Shovel Knight. The same goes for Hyper Light Drifter, Super Meat Boy, and again, we could spend another 5 minutes naming examples. Now, the other aspect is about why retro gaming is so popular is that this also lends the other aspect of what has helped make the indie market so unique. And that's the fact that it allows developers to really experiment with unique designs, unique mechanics that we wouldn't see in the AAA space. You're not going to see a game like Shovel Knight or Hyper Light Drifter being released from a studio like EA, Naughty Dog, Insomniac, etc. Because again, the mainstream market doesn't really seem to be interested in 2D games. They want, of course, the latest and greatest. And you can't really sell someone a 2D game for $60. Although that would be kind of interesting now that I think about it. Can anyone think of a game like that? Do you think you could actually make a 2D side-scroller that costs $60 today? That's actually quite a bit of an interesting challenge. But with the indie market itself, being able to experiment and make these very interesting titles, this kind of retro gaming just seems to kind of, fit perfectly. And, there's another example, Rogue Legacy. For the next 4 or 5 minutes as I'm talking, examples will probably be popping into my head. And as we said earlier, it allows for you can really get around a lot of the challenges of modern 3D gaming with 2D design. With Momodora and some of the other examples I played lately, there are some very tight and responsive controls. And you really need that if you want that kind of challenge. But with that said, even though 2D gaming is considered retro, you can really go across the spectrum in a sense in terms of how you want to design a game. You can go for something that's a lot more slower pace or more story grounded, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I forget that game. For those of you who watch Game Wisdom in the YouTube channel, this was that train game from a few months ago with the zombies, or the zombies, I should say. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, you could go for something super challenging like Dust Force, which again, despite being 2D, is a very hard game to play and incredibly challenging to master. Now, we have seen some developers go back to retro games in the loose sense. We've seen, of course, Mega Man 9 and 10, Bionic Commando Rearm, but in terms of fully dedicating the full might of a AAA studio to a 2D game, that we're not really seeing. Now, with the independent space, of course, it also lends to the accessibility. 2D games are a lot easier to play than 3D. All you really need is, of course, there we go, a good old gamepad, or even keyboard and mouse in some cases, and you're good to go. You don't need the latest and greatest computer. You can play them, they don't take up a lot of gigabytes. And all of this just adds up to the strengths of the independent scene. Now, because of the fact that this is, of course, 2017, we can at least talk a little bit about what this means for the future. I don't think retro games or retro gaming is going to go away anytime soon. Or I should say modern retro gaming. I completely forgot my own tag for today. But as long as there's room to experiment and iterate, 2D games, especially for independent developers, is going to become a popular pastime. And we've definitely have seen 2D games become or grow from game jams or even just simply, trying to build something in your portfolio. You never know when inspiration will strike. And again, there's just such a wide berth in terms of 2D design. Not just in terms of, casual versus hardcore, but in terms of mechanics. The difference between a single jump and a double jump can be huge in terms of game mechanics and level design. And we could easily dedicate who knows how many critical thoughts delving more into the various aspects of 2D game development. But to wrap up today's critical thought and to summarize, modern retro gaming again has become a very popular option. For developers, it's a lot easier to develop rather than a 3D game, both in terms of time and of course money. And it allows pretty much anyone to enjoy these games. And given the wide variety of mechanics, design, and of course the audience that you're aiming for, it's not going to go away anytime soon. As I mentioned in my end of 2016 video, I am certainly looking forward to Cuphead, which of course is going to be another modern retro kind of design. Of course, that game's retro is in terms of its animation aesthetics. For those of you watching, are there any modern retro games that you particularly like? And what do you think of the genre? Be it as a consumer seeing these games on Steam, Ichigo, I think that's what it's called, GOG, and more. And as a consumer, do you enjoy these types of games? I'm going to assume that for my regulars here on the YouTube channel, especially for fans of indie games, that you probably enjoy them, but let me know in the comments. Once again, thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying these videos, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure if you come up with a topic you would like me to cover, let me know in any of the comments below. And of course, be sure to vote for the 1000 Let's Play. Right now, the current vote is for the Zachtronics playthrough, which may drive me mad. So, if you want to suggest another one or vote, be sure to let me know. Again, your choices are between the Zachtronics play, a Paradox Interactive play, or a Bethesda RPG play. But that's going to do it for tonight. Hope everyone is fully rested after New Year's Eve. Once again, I am Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow with more great content here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.